And if you please introduce yourselves as we go down.
Hi, I'm Matt Demerit. I played E.T. in the stunt scenes.
I'm Tommy Howell. You want me to continue? I can go through my credit list if you want.
Shut the F up, will you?
I'm Robert MacNaughton, and at some cons I am bloody and disgusting.
Oh!
My finger.
I'm henrythomas.
Well, this is a reunion for a little-known film. I don't know, how many of you seen E.T.? Everyone in there? How many saw E.T. when it first opened? How many saw E.T. when it aired on television? Okay. How many of you saw E.T. when it was on VHS? DVD? Blu-ray? 3D? Apple TV? I think we get the point, Mike. Basically, this is one of the most important films of the last 40, 50 years. I think we all can agree to that. I think it's one of the iconic American films, and I just can't say enough how grateful I am to be able to share a stage, to be able to talk to everyone here, because this is surreal, to say the least. I want to kick this off, though, because you know, this was an incredible event for everyone in the world and everyone in this room. What was it for you at the time, though? You know, going back to 1982, was it just a different type of magic for you, where you're watching everyone just being so like, oh my gosh, like, you know, sold on it? You're behind the scenes. You saw how the magic was made. What was it? What was the feeling like at that time when it was coming out? Did you share the magic?
Talking about after it came out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was pretty magical for all of us.
Yeah.
And overwhelming and really not expected. I don't think any creative person goes in to a film or a TV project going, oh, this is going to be a big hit. Well, thank you.
That's why I'm here. And good night.
I always need somebody to turn me on.
Oh.
You still got it, girl.
This is the after hours ET.
Hey, I only played E.T.'s mom, okay?
What about everyone else, though? I mean, in terms of just being able to see this phenomenon unfold, and especially even over the last, few decades, I mean, what do you make of it? Is it something like when you, it's kind of like you're wearing a Bob Dylan shirt, and I always wonder, like, what does Dylan think of when he sees, like, people react to these songs that have been in his head for, 40, 50 years? I mean, I know you laugh, but it's as ubiquitous as any Dylan song. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's a part of a tapestry that I don't think any film, and look, I love horror movies, but nothing in this, in all of our shirts, all of our genres that come close to this. It's something that's on another level. And I've always just wondered, how does that feel for people behind the scenes in this?
It feels strange.
Yeah.
Because I remember when it was in theaters, it was a couple of weeks, and then it became kind of an undeniable hit. But those first couple of weeks, it was, anything could have happened. And I don't think, like Dee said, none of us, when you're working as an actor or on the crew, you go from job to job, and maybe there's a year or so that happens between the time when you film the project to the time that it's released. So it's not even, it's not even in the zeitgeist of your life at that point, and it becomes successful.
Yeah.
And then it takes on a whole different meaning.
Henry had quite a unique, I'm not going to speak for you, but Henry was...
I think you are for me right now, Robert.
But
Classic
I'm
brothers.
sort of proud of how he came out of the experience, because he went back to high school, or no, not even high school, but grade school.
Yeah, elementary.
Elementary school in Texas after E.T. So none of the other kids, at least if you're in the LA area, there might be a few other kids that could relate to the child actor experience, but he had nobody at his school that related to it. and he had to endure a lot of stuff, like, you know, that you say, oh, you know, like that, but he had to endure being basically, you know, everybody jealous of him,
Oh, yeah, kids are
thinking he was
cool.
bigger, you know, but he never got a big head. He wasn't like that. He was a very shy, well, back then. Anyway, but the fact that he's like even somewhat normal today is amazing, because it took a lot of
You paint
temerity.
such a beautiful picture of me.
Anyway, you know, so I had a different experience. I was doing a lot of stage plays. So after the movie came out, my life didn't change much, and that I was doing a lot of plays beforehand, and I kept doing a lot of plays. So I sort of didn't have the same experience, because I wasn't going back to school full time. I was just sort of continuing
Oh,
my
I was.
professional.
But you got called penis breath all through high school.
I mean, there was that, but then
Thank you, and you're welcome.
I booked more plays.
I'm glad you mentioned the penis breath, Henry. I never thought I'd say that when I woke up this morning. But that was a pretty big gateway for a lot of kids to be like, oh, what's that mean? And then let's ask questions about this.
All the parents thought
Oh.
they were going to wonder what that means.
Yes.
But all the kids knew.
Yeah.
That line came about because Melissa was in line at a grocery store, and she overheard she wrote the screenplay for E.T., Melissa Matheson, and she overheard a teenager say it to another teenager, and she said, you know, that's going to go in the movie. So nobody realized, I mean, it is a Steven Spielberg film, but nobody realizes how big a part of it Melissa Matheson was. She was there on the set every day, and she worked with us kids a lot, and would listen to suggestions from all of us.
Yeah.
And put things in the movie that, you know, and it was great to have. That's very rare to have the writer there, and she was an amazing lady, like amazing woman that is really well missed by all of us.
Yeah, I heard Melissa Matheson and Steven Spielberg wrote a sequel, actually, that hasn't been produced. Would you all be open to a sequel if that was...
Not that
Who
one.
did you hear that from?
It's a rumor that's been floating around.
Yeah,
for
I think
years.
it's a rumor.
Yeah.
There was a
For
treatment.
years.
There was a story treatment that Melissa wrote.
Was it? It seems to me though, it's all agreed upon that like, no, this is it. This is
This
the
is
one.
it, yeah.
This is the
As
story.
long as Mr. Spielberg's alive, there's not going to be a sequel.
Yeah, yeah.
But-
What I understand.
Or a remake.
Or
Yeah.
remake,
And definitely not a remake.
Definitely.
I'm like imagining the kid though that said that incredibly singular comeback, like at the theater, being like, "Someone heard me. Like, someone heard me say." Like I've never heard it. I mean, that's an interesting one to kind of pick up on though. But I want to talk a little bit more about 1982 because you know, everyone talks about their wedding days and they're like, "Oh, it's a blur. I don't remember most of it." Do you remember a lot of that year?
Oh,
I
I
mean,
remember everything.
yeah.
Yeah. I actually auditioned for used cars.
Oh,
And
nice.
fortunately did not get it. And so when E.T. came along, Stephen just offered it to me. But of course, there was a lot of secrecy going on back there then because people were stealing ideas. So it was called A Boy's Life. And when my agents called me, I said, okay, but I have to read the script. They said, it's Steven Spielberg, Dee. I said, exactly. I'm going to walk onto a set and not know whether I can bring this to life or not. I've got to know as an actress. So I went over to the studio behind closed doors that were locked and read the script. And I remember calling my agents and saying, I don't think it's going to do a lot for me, but I think it's going to do a lot for the world, and I want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And you're
And I was right, wasn't
You were
it?
wrong on one count.
That it wasn't going to do a lot for me.
Yeah.
It helped.
So having lived it, what's the difference between the impact of like a Star Wars and something like E.T.? They both have such a legacy to them and such a fan base. How would you feel about that?
Well, here's the #1 Star Wars fan at the time. It was right after, he was 10, and it was right after Empire Strikes Back had come out. And you had all the toys. All the toys you see in the movie were Henry's toys.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was really excited because I knew that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were good friends, and I knew that they worked together, and I thought, this is going to be something like Star Wars, because when I got the part, of course I hadn't read the script, and I only knew a loose premise, and I remember as a 10-year-old reading the script and being disappointed that there were no laser battles. But there was a spaceship, so that was kind of cool.
The neat thing was there's so many Star Wars references in the movie
Yeah.
because Steven knew that George Lucas wasn't going to sue him. So like, I wouldn't have been allowed to do the Yoda voice if they didn't have that relationship. And you know, a lot of things, the Star Wars toys, you know, there's a million references in it.
Yeah, well, what's also interesting is that Melissa Matheson and Harrison Ford were a couple.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was a big deal because Harrison Ford was on set quite a bit. And
This was right after Indiana Jones.
I was,
Wow.
I mean, he was my hero, you know, so that was very exciting for me to be part of that. So I felt like
Well, you got to do a scene with them.
I got to do a scene with him, yeah.
He was the principal, or?
Yeah, he was the principal.
Were you disappointed when he wasn't in the movie? Why didn't he appear in the movie?
Well, he didn't want to appear in the movie.
Uh,
Like, so even in the scene, he said, he was like, yeah, Stephen, I'll be in the scene, but I don't want you to film my face. So,
You know,
it was-
part of that too, excuse me,
No, go
was
ahead.
because Stephen only wanted the children until the doctors came in. And that's literally one of the reasons I got hired, because he liked my vulnerability and childlike
Yeah.
quality.
You're the only adult that you see above the waist.
Yeah, tits up.
True enough. How was that? Well, in one scene you get the full view in Halloween.
My
But
cat's sick.
literally, I felt, remember the actor that showed up, and there's a scene where the policeman's asking, you know, when Elliot disappears, and he's asking, and I remember the look on the guy's face when, you know, you're filming the scene with them, and he found out his head wasn't gonna be seen. Remember?
No, I don't.
It was the cop that was saying, you know, has he been missing
Yeah.
for a while, and
Yeah.
it had to be crushing to be, or the teacher. You never see the teacher, you just see him, you know, talking in his back, and
It's such an important distinction, though, and it's just it really is a testament to like kind of his eye, and you know the point of view is, you know, just rewatching it again a couple times this week. I totally did forget that it does feel. I mean, sorry to lose an example, but like the Muppet Babies, where you just like only see the teacher's
Yeah.
legs
well, he
and
got
stuff
it
like
from
that,
the
you know?
cartoons. He got it from the Warner Brothers cartoons. He said that in interviews that, you know, where you only see the adult's legs.
And so was your show, and I mean, D, for you, was that a hurdle, or did he talk to you about that point of view? You know,
Never.
No, oh no, you're just like, all right,
No.
go.
No, but also,
I found out at the end, and that's why I got hired. But I agree with him. I just have that, you know, kind of thing going on.
but Dee had to put up with the uncomfortable position of being an adult on a film set where there were a lot of kids
Yeah.
working. So what happens in that case though is that you sit around all day
Yeah,
while
that
they
I
film
did
the
want.
kids out before they turn into pumpkins after 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever.
Because of the school requirements. They're required to give you 3 hours of school, and so it's a constant juggling act of trying to get, you know, as much screen time of the kids and then rush them to school, but they try to do all that before they film the scenes with the adults, if they can.
Like 3 weeks. One time I sat in my dressing room waiting to work.
Oh wow.
With like a 6 a.m. call where she gets there, gets a makeup,
Yeah.
and then, but they have to be there in case something happens, and they got to be able to film that scene out of order, you know.
But I have to say, unlike a lot of scenes, because you know I've worked with kids and dogs my whole career, that when I did E.T., if I had a scene with one of the kids, which I had a lot of, the kids were always there. I always had you guys to work with.
That's true.
You were a very bad boy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's why they hired me.
You are the bad boy.
So, briefly,
Pinch my.
Yeah, I did try to pinch your ass in this scene.
True story?
Oh yeah, it's there. It's on film. It's there.
Oh my God.
It wasn't in the script.
Lots of stuff weren't in the script.
Yeah. So basically, here's how I was brought in. So, my father picked me up at school and said, we're going to town and you're going to meet a gentleman named Steven Spielberg. And at the time, I was interested in riding horses and I was sort of a country kid and I didn't know who Steven was. Of course, I saw Raiders, but still, it meant nothing to me. And about a mile down the road, my father shoves a pack of Marlboros in my hand with a book of matches and says, here's the thing, you have to learn how to smoke this. And I was like, okay. So I'm turning green trying to smoke these cigarettes on the way to the audition. And I get to the casting call and I walk into this room and there's like 6 guys that all look identical. They look like John Stamos with perfect feathered black hair and blue eyes. And I said, Dad, let's get out of here because I'm not going to get this part. Well, little did I know that my role had been cast previously by a young Mormon kid whose mother wouldn't let him smoke a cigarette. So they decided to replace him. So one by one, these kids go in and out of the room and I get my opportunity to go in and I'm in this, sitting on a stool and there's Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall and Steven and all the casting people, Marcy Learoff and Mike Fenton and a couple of other suits. And he starts asking a few questions and he notices my father's a stunt man and asks if I can ride the dirt bike. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. He hands me a page because up until this point, I hadn't read the script at all. I knew nothing about it.
Nobody had.
And I started sort of reading some dialogue with him. And we get to the point of the meeting. He says, how do you feel about smoking a cigarette? Well, I fish out this rumpled pack of Marlboros and stick a bent cigarette in my mouth and start striking a match. He goes, all right, kid, you got the part. And,
That could never happen now. You know, do you realize that they couldn't give a kid a cigarette on an audition?
that's how I get all my parts. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and then I basically, said all the naughty stuff and tried to pinch Dee's ass and smoke cigarettes, and the rest is history.
Do any of the rest of you remember the hours leading up to your auditions? Or even the audition itself, the process?
We've all seen Henry's audition.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. That's
it's
true.
amazing. Mine was memorable. It was on the day that President Reagan was shot.
Wow.
The assassination attempt on President Reagan. So when I went in, it was my first meeting with Steven. It wasn't really an audition. It was just a sit down, what do you like to do, and all that. But there were people rushing in and giving him
You
the
pulled out
latest.
that Yoda voice.
Yeah.
You got the part.
No, all it was he asked me, what do you like to do? I like to ride bikes. I play D&D. And it was like everything I said was the right thing. So I felt kind of backwards into it. Like he knew that I had a reputation for doing stage work because that's how I sort of got the audition. Was somebody had seen a play I did in New York and had me come in. So then they had me read with all the other actors that were trying out for Elliot. And I didn't read a script. It was just an improv with a stuffed animal. And they said, pretend you're showing that your brother's showing you this crazy thing that is the craziest thing you've ever seen. They didn't even say alien. So I improv'd with almost every other actor that was 10 years old in Hollywood, and nobody could hold a candle to him. I mean, it was like, when he showed up, it was like night and day with the other actors. No offense to the other actors, because they were all good, but nobody was as good as Henry.
I remember the first time I was exposed to Henry preparing for a scene. We had this sort of indoor set, backyard built on stage, and there was a swing set. And, of course, I just wanted to play video games at lunch with Henry. And his mother said he needs a moment, and he was over on the swing set, and like an adult prepping this emotional scene, and I hadn't been exposed to that. I thought I was going to be a stunt guy like my father, and watching people work, like what Dee did with Drew and that connection that the two of them had, and being exposed to the vulnerability, the love, the trust, really shaped my whole approach to what I was doing, because I had no idea what I was doing. It was my first time really exposed to any of that. So watching Henry and watching Dee and watching Robert do what they went through to create this beautiful piece of work really was mind-blowing. That mixed in with a lot of little people and Matt rolling around on a skateboard and puppeteers, and it was, for a child, really a mind-blowing experience. Aliens and spaceships and all kinds of things, and the security was top-notch.
Oh my God.
It was like everybody had to sign in to come onto the set, and all the adults had badges, and
Yeah.
like Dee said, nobody had read a script. In fact, today somebody brought an original Boys Life script for me to sign, which I really wanted to fucking punch that guy and steal that from him. I was just
None
like,
of us got to
wow.
keep it.
Yeah.
People ask me if I have it, I never
There's no
kept
script.
it. Yeah. With all the inserts. Mine was stuffed full of pink and blue pages and all the different, because they would hand you changes that Melissa had written that day sometimes.
The day before, I'd get my
Yeah.
pages.
A lot of dialogue changes, like in the night before, and that's what, like, Melissa every day used to sit. When I would go into work, I'd go through the works, makeup, hair, wardrobe. Then I would go sit with Melissa for whatever amount of time, and we'd go over all of the changes. And she had a huge hand in the making of the film.
She even
huge.
came around afterwards. We had to loop dialogue for TV when they were going to show it on TV and they were going to cut out all the cuss words. And she came in and did that, which is really unique, because if you watch some movies, Do the Right Thing, they
There's
use
nothing
Mickey
like that
Ficky.
purple breath.
Yeah, exactly. It's always stupid. Or like in Do the Right Thing, they say Mickey Ficky for another word, which, but it's always stupid. But they made sure they got the quality dialogue, and they had her come in and do it.
And you shot in continuity, right? Or was
Yeah.
it kind of?
Mostly, yeah.
Mostly they did the location stuff first. The stuff about the bike chase and all that was first. And the very first day was the frog scene,
Oh, wow.
which to me
Yeah,
is
the school
amazing.
was-
Yeah.
Because it's so virtuosic the way it's directed. And that was the first day.
God. It's like,
It's so weird because I don't remember any script changes.
Just minor
You would act
dialogue
like-
changes.
Dialogue stories, like stuff like
What did you say?
I adore you. Dee played my mom in Secret Admirer, by the way. And my father was a stunt coordinator on Cujo, so I spent a lot of time with this lady. She doesn't remember a lot of it.
loves me.
I do. Amazing.
I never, ever, ever drank on the set.
That we know of.
but the thing, I wouldn't be surprised though if it was though, and I have a point to this. Not to I'm not criticizing the set or anything. Looking back at the '80s, and when everyone thinks about the '80s, they're like, Miami Vice, and especially now with Stranger Things, they got the the whole look of it. But by June of 1982, you get Poltergeist and E.T. You get the ambulance effect that comes into the portrait of Americana is much different. And the thing that stuck out to me is, I think for a lot of kids my generation, we were used to not seeing two parents at the table. We were used to seeing, a bunch of kids that were kind of doing whatever they want. I mean, I stole cigarettes from my mother at 3rd grade. And, a lot. So seeing that on screen was a big deal because it was like, all right, well, this is kind of happening. I mean, obviously it doesn't happen now for good reason. But what I'm trying to get at is that, at the time, this movie is pretty much carving a portrait of where America's going. And I wondered, as you see, movies that fall in the aftermath that are certainly, trying to capture that magic again, even Spielberg, with doing Temple of Doom and, having the short run character, The Goonies, going through the 90s, all of a sudden Hollywood's like, all right, well, let's focus on the kids. But what I think separates your film, and this is where I get back to the drinking thing, is that I feel like you were treated like adults too, and this was an adult movie, and it wasn't a kid's movie, and I feel like there's a crossroads there, and I'm wondering, when you look back on it and you see the aftermath of it, has that come to mind ever? You know, does it feel like a watershed moment?
You know, I think it's a people movie.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And that's what sets it apart, is that it's universal and it passes some mental barrier so that it reaches into your heart and reminds you of what the truth is. And you can't put an age on that.
Yeah.
At all.
I think also it was kind of directed by a big teenager.
Yeah,
So
seriously, he was like a kid.
He was very relatable for all of us. He would let us come in and play the video games in his trailer. Him and Frank Marshall had
Games in his trailer.
He had, not, I mean, by video games, I mean video arcade machines. They had the full-size arcade machines in the business. I know where you're going. But no, he had the arcade. He had Missile Command, and he had an ongoing thing with Frank
Want to
Marshall.
come play video games in my trailer?
You went there.
Robert was like, yes, sir.
We're going anywhere today. I'm loving it.
But
And then he got the part.
I was good at playing video games. What can I say?
Matt, I have a question for you about the suit. How was the suit? How was that, wearing that for hours and hours at a time?
Well, the thing with the suit back then is the latex recipe was terrible, because whenever the suit got, whenever latex got wet, it shrank. So every successive time they put it on me, it was tighter and tighter. So, and also that made it hotter too, because the more it shrinks, the less porous it is. So it's not as breathable. So yeah, it was very hot. You'd think they'd have the budget to make me cooler back then, but I don't know, they couldn't afford it.
But the thing is Matt sort of took over being ET because he could do so much and he was so athletic that they kind of hired him at first to do the scenes where he's falling down and drunk and stuff like that, but then pretty much he went into it full time because the gentleman that was originally in the suit got very sick and he had some back problems, and you know, it was strenuous. But Matt was like a trooper and basically would do anything. Like he could fall over 20
You know how we got
times.
E.T.'s walk, right?
Yes.
You want to tell
He used to say that I stood on my hands upside down in the costume.
Well, that's what
I
I
wish
was
I could have
told.
done that.
it? Oh, that's not true?
No.
No, you stood on your hands.
But Matt would walk on his hands.
I'll demonstrate the walk right now.
Yeah, and it literally is ET. So, like Matt was like,
Of course, I have dad bod now, so it's not as easy to walk around that way.
So did E.T.
So true. He had a pot belly, didn't he?
so when I watch the movie, for me, what I see when I see ET is I see Matt, a part of Matt who I love. I see Caprice Roth, who did the hands, who's an
mime.
amazing mime. But she was also like a teenager. She always hung out with us. She was very, very funny lady, and you know, so she did the hands, and she would be underneath the machines, and they'd be pouring potato salad and beer on her head. She was a trooper too. But so her, you know, but the way the hands are so expressive, and then the voice is also a big part of it. And the lady that did the voice passed away, but we did get to meet her, but not till after the movie came out. And at one event, she was there, and she walked up to Henry and Drew and I, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
And all of a sudden, it was E.T. talking to us out of this old lady's voice. You know, it was like, hello, nice to meet you. Because she really spoke like that. And
Lots
Drew,
of cigarettes.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Drew just went like that, like her mind was blown at that point.
Yeah.
Robert, what was that rumor with the Deborah Winger thing? What, like, people were saying for a while that she had something to do with the voice. How did that rumor even get started? What is that
I
story?
finally cleared it up.
Yeah.
It was actually I read it in the book that they did a very extensive research. There's
Oh,
a good
you
book
can't believe that.
that came out called From Concept to Classic. And what it was she was very close with Steven at the time, and they were going to work on something else together. She was
Video games
She
in
was
his
a friend
trailer.
with him. I don't know. But she was around on the set a lot. She was also very like a teenager kind of. And anyway, but as a favor to him, she did what's called a click track, so that when he was editing, he would have an actor's voice. Because when we were doing it, E.T. was always his voice. He would always read E.T.'s lines, Stephen. So sometimes when you watched the movie, you actually thought it was Stephen talking.
No, when I first saw it, I thought that
He said, "Hey, what's wrong?"
I was like, they need to take Stephen's voice out of the sound.
Because he was always doing
always
E.T.'s
talking,
lines.
yeah.
So she did that as a favor to him. It was never going to be her voice.
Okay.
And for years, I thought it was going to be her voice, and they just had to remove it because she's got such a
So
recognizable
she
voice.
did like the original voice work so they could cut to it.
Right.
Okay.
And I didn't know that until I read that book. It's a really good book. It came out for the 40th.
She's in the film though, in the
Oh
Halloween
yeah, she is
scene.
in the film.
Deborah Winger, she's wearing a mask and she's carrying a
Oh,
dog.
wow.
And she has a stethoscope around her.
Yeah.
And she's limping down the street. That's Deborah Winger.
You know, speaking of the Halloween scene, you all had great costumes. Dee, your cat costume, I wish I could find it today. It's amazing. Did any of you have input on those costumes? They were so, like, very ubiquitous, like 80s, very unique, and I love them.
No,
But I had to do my own makeup. Steven wanted me to do
Oh,
my own.
really?
I didn't know
face paint.
that.
Yeah, so I had a drawing of what it was meant to look like, and I had to kind of emulate it. So
this happens, I want you to know, every time we do a Q&A. One of us or more goes, what?
Because we were in
What do you
school.
mean you didn't walk on your hands? For 30 freaking years I thought you walked on your hands. It's crazy.
40.
Pretty. All right.
Too soon. Too soon.
Hey, it's not the years, it's the all right. Henry, coming into this film, did you know that so much of it was going to be on your shoulders? That this is going to be, I mean, you were going to be carrying almost every scene.
no, I mean, like I said, I hadn't read the script.
Yeah.
So
There's no preemptive, like, all right.
well, I had just begun my career that year, 1980, 81. I got a film, I'm from San Antonio, Texas, or outside of it, and Sissy Spacek was shooting a film about 45 minutes away from where I grew up, and they needed 2 boys, and I tried out for the oldest boy in this, in this movie called Raggedy Man, and I ended up getting the part because it was cast locally. Otherwise, I didn't have any ties or any ends or any knowledge about films or the film business.
Thank God.
I got Raggedy Man, and I had done some plays and stuff in local theater in San Antonio. And that was my only acting experience, and I really didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know how to go about it. But when they would ask me to do something or to hit this mark, and I learned, and I was trying to learn as fast as I could, and I was trying to watch the other actors, and I was trying to, as a guitar player, you call it comping, right?
Mhm.
It's the same kind of thing.
Let's see, in that movie you were working with Eric Roberts, Sissy Spacek, and Sam Shepard.
Yeah.
So, good people to learn from.
Good
Yeah.
people to learn from. No, and that's the truth of it. I had the best experience I could have had right out of the gate with Raggedy Man. I worked with some great people, and
Henry, what's the story about the ET audition? There was a process that happened, like you read something in the paper, or what is that story?
well, basically, this wasn't for ET. This was for Raggedy Man. I saw in the newspaper that there was, and I was 8.
What were you doing reading the newspaper at 8? By the way.
Well, that was the thing. That's what I used to do when I was 3. When I was 3, I taught myself to read because I had memorized all my childhood books.
Was this before or after the rattlesnake bite?
This was after the rattlesnake.
You got bit by a rattlesnake and like miraculously
That was
survived.
that was my first brush with fame. I made the front page in 1973.
The only reason he's alive is because his mother drove like 100 miles per hour down these dusty streets that were 25 miles per hour and got him to a hospital where they were the only hospital doing a revolutionary procedure where they were using horse blood to treat snake bite.
Yeah.
And it's the only reason he's alive.
And yeah, it was the horse blood.
So he's
you
part
know.
horse.
So yeah, but I mean, it was a bad thing, but I'm okay. No ill effects.
The original Pony Boy.
He did a movie later with Matt Damon you may have seen called All the Pretty Horses. And nobody realizes he was one of the pretty horses.
Just switching back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
I was the ugliest pretty horse.
Oh, no.
No, it was kind of strange because it just all the stars kind of aligned, and you know, Raggedy Man was a Universal film. Spielberg had kind of taken over for Tobe Hooper on Poltergeist, and they were editing Raggedy Man and Poltergeist across the hall from each other. So they heard in the rumor mill that Spielberg was looking for a kid, and the director and the editor of Raggedy Man gave him a clip. It was a Universal movie, it was all in-house. They said, oh, well, we'll bring him out and look at this kid. And so that's what they did.
And you know, Poltergeist was supposed to be the big hit. E.T. was this little film that he was kind of doing on the side.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that about kids and everything in the 80s. You know, like, before E.T., that wasn't a possibility in the studio's minds.
Yeah.
Putting out a studio film that was like, you know, a kid movie, that wasn't gonna get the mainstream audience, so it wasn't gonna make a lot of money. So, like, the first trailers for E.T., they're all ominous. You know, it's like, he's 3,000 million, you know, whatever.
Yeah, they make it
It's
look like Halloween.
Yeah, it's like this hand coming in, oh, spooky outhouse thing with lights and fog, and, you know, but it's because the studio, they were hedging their bets. They wanted to pack people in the first week, and then people responded to the emotion of it and the compassion of it, and they changed tack and catered to that, and all
And
the
a month
other
later,
guys-
we were all eating Reese's Pieces.
Oh my God.
You guys know that they offered it to M&M's
Oh.
first, right?
Ultimate
And
fun.
M&M's didn't want to be involved with an alien. And I thought, man, the day that E.T. came out, somebody got fired.
That's what you said. That's what you said last time.
And the same thing happened with Dungeons and Dragons. There's a scene in the beginning where we're all playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they sent just those pages of the script to the creator, to Gary Gygax, and he misunderstood somehow that there was money on the table for the pizza, and he thought that implied that we were gambling on the game, and he said, I will not allow gambling on Dungeons and Dragons. I overheard Kathy Kennedy saying that we can't use the name, you know, and why. She explained to Steven why they couldn't use the name, but they could have done tie-ins and, you know.
I will
Had it
say
on
I
the
did
box.
think it was betting when I was a kid, and I was like,
It
let's
did
be
look
like
like, yeah.
yeah. I was like, let's be like the kids at DT. Let's get some smokes, and we're gonna get. Not that this is a good idea for anyone that's a young kid here, but like that was like it was definitely the modus operandus for us. Like, all right, if they can do it, we got, you know. Not to say that was a, you know. Anyway, I'm digging a hole here, but yeah, that was. It definitely felt like, oh, these are bad boys, and then the mom
Yeah,
was
and I
like
want to
kind
be
of cool with
them.
it.
I want to be their friend.
Yeah. Because it's, you know, there's an edge.
And I think Mary, according to Stephen anyway, Mary was the first divorced mom on screen in a major motion picture.
That would make sense. Yeah. It was
And-
beautifully depicted too, so realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I actually had a young man come up to me at a convention and say, you know, I was from a very small town in the South, and I was in like 4th grade, and my parents got divorced, and even my best friend shunned me. I was a total outcast, and that summer, E.T. came out, and all of a sudden I had permission to be included again. It's really the power of what we do, you know?
That's really what, to me, that's what the movie's about, though. It's about the loneliness of a child of divorce and the finding a friend. I mean, those are the themes that really hit hard with people that really resonated, I think, are because of Henry's performance and your performance.
And your performance.
No, but
And
just
your
the
ass pinching.
that really was a time when that was just sort of starting to happen after the 70s, and
Yeah.
and Stephen had gone through it himself, and so it was deeply personal for Stephen.
And it's layered. Like I'm an older brother, and we were watching it last night again. And there's something about the way you react to Elliot, because you have to be kind of like the paternalistic role. And you're like, why do you do that? Like, why did you say that? And like, that's such an interesting arc that I don't think at the time anyone really saw that. It was like, oh, the older brother kind of has to be kind of the patriarch in a way, like, but to the kids though, like, to his brother, and like, I don't know, like, it did normalize that a lot growing up, because seeing a lot of the things that were happening around my friend. I mean, I'm 40 now, so it was around the time when like it felt like growing up for me, it was like getting divorced was in vogue. Like it was like, oh, your parents are divorced. Like that was surprising if they weren't. And so, but it was because we had seen movies like E.T. that felt like, oh yeah, well this is kind of de rigueur. But like the older brother arc, I always think about, because it's just like it is such a small little nuance that they do in this movie, and there is a lot of weight on your shoulders. And I think it's like one of those like. It's another facet of this movie that shows that it is such an adult film. Like you just wouldn't really have that in kind of like the more mainstream kid films.
At one point, I call her Mary, which seems so odd to me because my parents were together, and
I still don't understand why y'all called me Mary. I don't.
I know it, but I know it happens, and it's like I've seen children that call their parents by their
Really?
first name. Yeah, and at the time I had never seen that, but then, and it felt very odd to me at the time. But in the point where I call her Mary, it's when we first are going to show her E.T. So it seemed like that fit, because it was like, listen, just come here, and like I'm telling you.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
You're trying to be an adult too.
Yeah.
in that
Right.
moment.
There are a lot of oddities to the film too. I always thought that Mary is one of them. I'm glad you said that, because I never understood that. Why are they growing corn in the backyard? Why are elementary school students cutting open frogs? I never got to do that when I was a kid. I love that about the film, that there are oddities about it.
Yeah.
Spielberg's isms. I think.
Can we hear the Yoda voice?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You have absolute power. Yes. the laugh. The laugh. I still can't get over how brilliant his laugh was, because he cracked himself up. When you watch Empire Strikes Back, the whole scene with Luke Skywalker, he's like making himself laugh. It's so great.
That was a cool.
That was Henry's idea that I do the Yoda voice, by the way.
Well, because Robert, when we were working, Robert was what, 15?
I was 14 when we did it,
14.
and you were 10.
And I was 10. But
I'm
Robert
not
was.
telling you how old I am.
But Robert was like keyed
20 years
into like all the cool music, and he.
I was
listened
listening to Dr. Demento,
Dr.
if you can
Demento.
consider that cool.
Radio
Of course
show.
you were.
And so, Weird Al Yankovic had just released Yoda, the Lola parody of the
It
Kinks.
wasn't even a record. He just sent the tape into Dr. Demento.
Yeah, and Dr. Demento played it, and we heard it, and I was like, oh. That's
It was
the
a
best thing
takeoff
I've
on the
ever
Kinks,
heard.
yeah.
And so then I became obsessed with it, and so I was like, Robert, you need to do the Yoda voice.
He said that sounds like something Yoda would say. So it was his idea that I say that line, that specifically that line, you have absolute power. And a friend of mine, Brian, recently pointed out that I didn't say it in the Yoda syntax, but that would have required changing Melissa Matheson's line, which,
You don't do.
Yeah, so according to him, it should be absolute power you have.
So Drew Barrymore has mentioned in her book that she, for a time when she first started the movie, thought that E.T. was real, especially the puppet. And obviously, all of you are too old to think the puppet was real. But what was it like working with a puppet, especially like, Henry, this was your second movie, like working with in that capacity. It must have been difficult.
Yeah, you know, I had to do all the work. No, the thing was that we had a great team of special effects guys. There were 13 guys that operated E.T. Some of them were on his respiratory system. Some of them were doing his eyes. Some of them were
Heart,
his heart, his mouth.
his neck.
And it was the first time I ever remember seeing like video assist on a set. It wasn't done back then. You didn't have playback or anything like you do now. But they had monitors like closed circuit television monitors on the stage, and they would watch. And so my perception of what E.T.'s voice was like came from the chorus of the 13 operators that would be on the other end of the stage, because they would vocalize the lip movements and stuff. So there would be 13 guys going, ouch. You know?
I wasn't a part of that. Like,
Yeah.
it was always, they were separate, and I think that was so they didn't distract us.
Right.
But you worked more closely with E.T. than anybody, so
Yeah, so
a
I mean,
different experience.
It was just, a lot of, it was a lot of technical stuff. That as a kid, you just try to stay in the fantasy of it anyway, but yeah, it would be challenging now, I think, for me to like interact with an animatronic thing on the same
you
level.
did the commercial.
Well, it's almost more difficult now because we're doing CGI and there is nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're working to a piece of tape on a green screen.
Yeah.
The only kind of special effects that we dealt with that we didn't actually see was the spaceship. When we watched the spaceship taking off, and the scene with Tom and Sean Fry and Casey Martell and myself while we're watching, and they just had tape on a lighting thing that they lifted.
That's all my career. You
Yeah.
work with kids and dogs. Hi, here's a tennis ball game. All of that. So I was used to it.
Yeah.
We had more ET for me than any other movie with a special.
We were blessed. It was like working with another actor,
It
because
was.
everything, it would react differently.
Yeah.
If you said a line differently, it would react differently to the way you said the line differently. So other than the voice not being coming out of the ET itself, the reactions were the same.
And back to your question about Drew, at the very beginning of the film, somebody saw her. E.T. was standing in a corner, not being used, and Drew was over there just talking to her.
God.
So
She talked to a
when
wall.
Steven found that out, he assigned two guys, my understanding, to always keep E.T. alive. Whenever Drew would come over to talk. Look, she was 4, right? And at that age, reality and fantasy go in and out for kids like this. So we get to shooting E.T.'s death scene, and she's on a stage next door, and I go over and I say, okay, Drew, we're gonna go shoot the scene where E.T.'s dying. But he's not really dying, he's just acting like we are. She says, I know, Dee Dee, you think I'm stupid? So I pick her up, we walk onto the set, she takes one look at E.T. and goes, he's dying! So it was like, am I stupid? Holy hell, he's dying, like that.
It was brutal, I'll tell you, because that was towards the end of filming, and crew members were getting upset because the way they had him, it was so realistic. The way he was on the hospital bed and everything, and Henry also with the electrodes taped all over him, and I mean, it was very realistic. All the doctors were real ER doctors that they had gotten from various hospitals around California.
One of whom was also an actor.
Oh. Yeah, but they
remember his name,
it was kind of pre-ER too, that they kind of used real emergency room terms and stuff
Yeah,
while
yeah.
they were working on him. They just sort of let him go.
That
He's
stretch
got
of the film-
DNA. That was not in the script.
That stretch of the film is harrowing, and it still hits today. I know they say like with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, you know, people that rented movies could see that like there are tracking errors with the Phoebe Cates pool scene. I like wouldn't be surprised if like
I didn't notice those.
Yeah,
For some reason.
I think I got it on beta.
I didn't see any errors with that scene, to tell you the truth.
But I imagine that stretch in ET for a lot of kids. You're like, all right, let's get to the part with the flower. Like, I gotta, like, the astronauts coming in, I need the flower. And because it really was, like, you do buy it. Like, you do believe that he's dying, and also Elliot. And it's a dark scene. And, like, even watching it last night, I was just like, oh my God, like, yeah.
And there's something on Google, if you look it up, it says, why E.T. is the most horrifying movie ever made. And they make a lot of valid points.
Yeah, it's.
They're not horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, please.
It's either E.T. or Cujo from the
Yeah.
80s. That's Scott.
Yeah, Cujo's a lot more horrifying than E.T.
Yeah.
I didn't fully appreciate Dee's performance in Cujo till I became a parent myself, but you know, boy, she does an amazing performance in that. It's heart-wrenching. I mean, it's like she should have won the Academy Award. I think because it like it's like primal.
Yeah.
It's like it's crazy, that movie. I mean, I watched it and I was like, you know, I was a Stephen King fan and then I read the book, but it, you know, seeing her performance makes it come alive.
Oh yeah, well Dee, in the
Yeah.
scene where Elliot comes back, he's been missing and he comes back, your reaction where you are just fully, I mean, it's so realistic, where you fully lose it, you drop to your knees, you're just like, don't ever do that again, and like, where were you? It's so visceral, like you feel it all through your body. It feels like your mother is yelling at you in that moment. It's amazing.
She knows her stuff.
And I have so many press people say, how did you play her? You didn't have any kids. I said, no, but I had a mother.
Yeah.
And my mother was, for all practical purposes, a single mom. My dad was a severe alcoholic. And so she worked, she made the money, she took us to church, it was her.
Wow.
And I knew that, oh my God, my kids, my work, I knew that persona and that energy.
The scenes, even the scene where, you know, Elliot says something to you that hurts your feelings, and them
He's
you
in
trying
Mexico
to,
with Sally.
Yes, he's in Mexico with
That's
Sally.
brutal.
Oh,
How could you?
What a-
your reaction and
So brutal.
the little dodging of their questions about their father felt so real. They felt very like a real single mother.
Yeah, and you know what happened in that scene?
Yep.
When he says he's in Mexico with Sally and your baby, see? And
So
all
brutal.
these tears start coming up, and Mary thinks, I don't want my kids to see me cry.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up and left, and Stephen came over and said, Dee, that's not in the script. Why did you get up and leave? And I explained to him what happened, and he looked at me and turned around and he said to his crew, you got a half hour, build me a kitchen wall, I need a sink with running water. You got a half hour, so he could continue that over to the sink and bring me into that big close-up where I say he hates Mexico. And it all happened because I was given permission to trust her, Mary, and followed the truth of Mary, and Stephen saw that truth and followed the artistry of following that through. And that, for me, is when the magic on a set really, really happens. And you would see him work with you guys. He would throw things out, well, say this and say that. And we were all kind of taken.
It was collaborative
Off
with Melissa
balance.
and Kathy Kennedy, who was a force of nature. I mean, first producing job, and she took care of everything, so Stephen didn't have to do anything. So he could just be himself, and she just took care of all the details.
Yeah, she was running defense.
Yeah, but like
basically,
for the first time producer, not too bad.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Looking at it now, I mean, we all have our favorite scenes. We all have, you know, the moments that get us. Is that the same for you? Do you go back and watch this movie? And what scene truly just like you're like, you know, you get choked up, or you kind of have to like maybe even walk away? Like, what's the scene that gets you the most?
Yeah, what scene gets you?
Yeah.
I just loved hearing the story that you just shared with
Yeah.
us about you know that moving to the sink, because that story represents the entire film for me personally, the truth and the love and the trust, and you know,
Yeah.
Steven's ability to be able to trust the artist, whether they're, you know, children
Yeah.
or an established actress like Dee at the time. A lot of mediocre directors won't entertain those impulses because they have a schedule to maintain. And those impulses are what make a film better. And Steven is a master with that. And then to me, that's what this film
Yeah.
encapsulates.
Yeah, those of you that want to direct, this is the best thing you'll hear on this panel. Do your storyboards, know where you're going, and then let go when the magic happens. And be able to go with the visceral reality of what's
And
true.
allow the gifts to be discovered in the moment,
Yeah.
because they are far bigger than anything that we could ever anticipate before we get there.
Yeah.
As long as you could do it within a half hour and stay on budget.
Stay under budget.
Well, this has been wonderful. This has been a hell of an afternoon. Certainly one I'll remember forever. Thank you all. Thank you so much for this incredible panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a film I'm sure we'll be watching forever. It's wild.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.